Thanks for coming. My name's Yancy Derringer-Bonner, and I'm the board chairwoman of By Western Hands. And we've had a really exciting year. I'll tell you all about that in a minute, some of the things we're doing to further our mission of preserving the legacy of Western design in Cody, Wyoming. First of all, I would like to recognize our fearless founders, Harris Haston and Carleen Leibus. Their generosity and their unwavering commitment to this mission has really been an inspiration for all of us, and we're lucky to have them as part of our community. I'd also like to recognize my fellow board members, Howard Thompson, Meg Frere, Ann Kroll, and Betsy Goodyear. They are four people who have a passion for design and a passion for Western design, and they've worked really hard this year to get us to where we've come. In February, we were lucky enough to coerce Denny Hammer out of retirement, and he agreed to serve as our interim executive director. And Denny has just been amazing. He hit the ground running like nobody I've ever seen, and he's been able to forge a really nice relationship with exhibitors and donors, and has just done a great job of keeping us really well organized. So thanks, Denny. So the most exciting news we have is that on August 31st, we were able to close on a space that will accommodate a year-round design center in Cody, Wyoming. And there will be three components in that design center. There will be an education component where there's a training area and wood shop in the back. People can begin an apprentice-level training program that will be accredited through Northwest College. They'll also be branching out and working in local craftsmen's shops and learning from them, so that's really exciting. We also have a museum component where we'll give a historical overview of the evolution of Western design as it began in Cody with Thomas Molesworth. And thirdly, we'll have a retail gallery where our guild members will have a place to sell their work year-round. And so we're really excited about that. We're hoping to begin construction in November and be open sometime in early summer of 2018. So we're really excited about perpetuating that legacy of Western design. And along those lines, we have a special guest, Chase Reynolds-Ewald. According to her Instagram, she writes about all things rustic and art, design, food, special places, and eccentrics of the American West. Her newest book, in collaboration with photographer Audrey Hall, is called Rustic Modern, and immediately following this presentation, Chase will be signing books upstairs at the gift shop. So welcome to Chase, and she'll talk a bit about the history of Western design in Cody.
Thank you, Yancy, and thanks to everyone. As always, it's my pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to be here. And I didn't plan to talk a lot about the history of the arts or design in Cody. I did talk about that 2 years ago in more detail with 4 colors on the screen, so hopefully some of you were there. I'm just going to say a few words about where we are now with this history of traditional craft in Cody. I have been involved with this show since it was the Masters Artisans Guild showing in the Irma. And it's been interesting witnessing all the different iterations from Western Design Conference to Cody High Style to now By Western Hands. And somebody asked me last week, I was in Pendleton, Oregon, and somebody asked me, By Western Hands, is that B-U-Y, Esther? And I was like, oh, I never thought about that, but yes, please do buy. It's been heartening and inspiring to see this group of artisans, Cody history enthusiasts, and art collectors step forward to create a sustainable long-term plan for the show after all these iterations, name changes, sort of venue changes, and sometimes not quite knowing whether there would be a show the next year. And of course, you've heard a little bit from Yancy. We know to whom we owe that, and we're all grateful. Cody obviously has a rich legacy in the arts, from fine arts to decorative and functional, along with Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney and Harry Jackson and so many others. Cody can boast Thomas Molesworth, and now the nucleus, a key group here in Cody with sort of tentacles expanding all over the country of connected people through this show, one of the most dynamic and important artisan movements in the country. So it's really important that Cody retain its attachment to this legacy. It's important for Cody. It's one of the things that makes it so unique and special in a rapidly homogenizing world. So I know we have the rodeo in the summer, and that's incredible, and it's very special and makes Cody a uniquely, authentically Western place. But there's a lot more going on here. There's a lot more to its history, and letting that sort of die away and have all the older generation sort of retire without properly training up this new generation, inspiring the younger people. I think it's incredible. There's an educational component, and there's going to be a place for these people to learn from the masters. You have to keep those people coming up. So it's just going to be one more thing that makes Cody, that keeps Cody so special and so authentic and so Western and so true to its roots. And it's, of course, important for the arts and the artists here to create an enduring legacy. So thanks to the board members, supporters, and artisans who have put on this show, exciting things are happening, as you've just heard. I think now is the time for everyone to consider how they can be supportive, whether it's banding together to get the word out on social media. I really think there's so much that can be done to just sort of, if everyone works together and shares each other's photos and this kind of thing and refers to each other's work and post pictures of other people's awards. It all circles around, and I think the group is really stronger together than apart, and there's a lot that can be done. But it's also important to invest in new work, lend expertise, or, of course, give financially if possible. I do talk to a lot of architects and designers in my work, and last week I interviewed 2 different architectural firms for articles. One firm is Jackson-based. They have about 40 people. They've always been in Jackson, and they're opening a shiny new office in Bozeman. The other is Bozeman-based, and they just built an entire new building, bought a site, built a huge building. I keep hearing from all these entities that they are doing really well. They have a lot of work. People are building homes. They love the West just as much as ever. They are doing they're really investing in things that are special. And of course, the work showcased here is about the most special work you can invest in to be part of this region. And so I get this sense things are kind of booming, and Cody should be a one-stop shopping destination for these architects and designers and their clients. And I think that having a year-round venue is going to be just amazing for that. And I think that it's going to be great, and I look forward to hearing the progress. And again, if people can participate in whichever way they're able, it'll really make a huge difference. Thank you.
Thanks, Chase. And now we are happy to welcome Phil Huber to Cody, Wyoming. He's the co-host of the PBS television show, The Woodsmith Shop, and is also the multimedia editor of Woodsmith Magazine. Welcome, Phil.
Well, I want to thank you all for the invitation to come out here. I haven't been to Wyoming ever. I had a friend that lived in Denver, Colorado for a while and was able to take the train out from Iowa, and when I lived previously in Chicago, to be able to see that. And so I just really wanted to say thank you to Carlene and Harris for the invitation and thinking of me. And in talking with them and in coming up with the presentation for today, I just felt like there was a lot of things that they were talking about that match really well with some of the things that I'm doing with Woodsmith Magazine, with the TV show, and some of our online education and video edition things that we're going to do. So what I want to do is put some of those things together, But before I talk about that, I just wanted to say that, I come from Iowa, and we leave a lot more of our horizon flatter and blander than you do out here. And so it's just really nice to be able to see things on the horizon, frankly. Because I can see, out once we get past the city limits, I can see into next Thursday. So here you can't even see 10 minutes away, so that's pretty cool. I grew up in Wisconsin and spent most of my formative years there, and I hesitate to make comparisons between places because each place offers its own richness and uniqueness. However, I think northern Wisconsin wants to be Wyoming when it grows up, so congratulations. Another thing that I really like is being able to get together with a bunch of people. Last night at the reception, Harris and Carlene introduced me to approximately 9,000 people. I've forgotten all of your names already. I apologize for that. But being able to meet a lot of the craftsmen and hear some of the stories of where they got started, why they're interested in the things that they're doing, really is exciting to me. And that's part of what I love doing and being involved with in woodworking, is being able to meet other woodworkers. I think there's a lot of exchange of ideas that happens with that, and that I frankly already have a couple of ideas for some projects that I want to try out. So I thank you to everybody out there for that. What's going to follow here in the next few minutes is something that my wife calls show and tell. Usually what happens if I've spent a really good day in the shop, had a really good day at work, just finished a really interesting book, I'm going to come into the house and for the next X number of minutes just blast at her with a number of things that I've learned. And it's 98% enthusiasm, 2% organization, and usually involves her being dragged out to my workshop to see something that I just got done with and that I'm excited about. So bear with me. This is what we're gonna go with today. Now, some of this may not be new to everybody, so if this is something that you've heard, I expect you to do a couple of these things in here. You may not agree with everything that I say, so I'm hoping to see maybe a couple of these. Don't do one of these. We'll try and have somebody kind of elbow you into the side if I start to see, I'll call on you. One of the things that I've found as I've done more and more woodworking, and in my role with the magazine and the TV show that I've seen, is I've moved from being somebody who's really interested in woodworking and connected that with what I am excited about in terms of teaching. Now, I know, and I'm going to make an artificial difference here, but I view education as this big institutional, not in a bad way, framework of what happens in being able to communicate knowledge to other people. But I'm going to dial it back, step it down into something a lot more personal in terms of just teaching, where it's two people or a small group of people that get together and share information. The teacher often teaches the student. That kind of makes sense. But in that education, there's a lot of back and forth, too, that the student ends up teaching something to the teacher, either to help that teacher understand more about what it is that they're doing. Raise your hand if you've ever tried to teach someone how to drive a manual transmission car to somebody else. You can do it easily, but the moment you try and explain that to somebody else, you enter a whole new world of what it means to be able to communicate that. So that's what I'm excited about, is being able to do that teaching where you're intimately involved in another person, where there's that feedback back and forth of what's going on. So that's part of what I want to talk about here too tonight, or this afternoon. In getting started, I think that as a culture, if I'm going to make generalizations, and my wife knows that I really don't like doing generalizations, but I feel like we suffer collectively from something that I've heard called as recentism, where the ideas that are happening, the current events, the things that we think about, the things that we do, are the most important, most significant, the pinnacle of whatever that has ever happened in life. And when we do that, we disregard and often shove off to the past that The people who lived in the past were either too primitive, didn't know what they were doing, didn't think clearly about what was going on. And I would like to draw the connection between the things that happen in our own world as a really strong connection and our flow naturally from the events that happened in the past. In light of that, I read a book recently. The title of it was called 1493. It was written by a guy named Charles Mann. And he talks about history in a way that I had never really connected the dots before and really turned it into a story because, I mean, we've all sat in history classes where it's just dates and names of people that often don't mean anything and are separated by years and years apart. But this book, 1493, really drew those things together. His main premise was that starting in that year, the world became the modern world that we're aware of today because of all the connections that were made and started. There was an explosion in global trade and transportation. That's the reason why we have people that are visiting here from Australia. You know, that's why I'm here from Iowa. You know, that there are people from all around this country. You know, and because of that, we have the opportunity to try the flavors and tastes and the cultures of a wide variety of places instead of being totally isolated, not knowing about the world around us. So there's a really strong set of benefits that go with that, but there's also some challenges that go with that too. He defines the world that started in 1493 as something called the Homogeneous, coming from the word homogeneous, where because people are trading and looking around at different things, people go to a different place and want it to make it look and feel comforting, so they'll bring along the things from their old place. And when you do that, you have that comfort, that sense of belonging in place. However, the downside of that is that we have a creeping sense of sameness that extends across our world now. You know, where you can see similar restaurants and stores all around the world, all around the country. And what that does is that when one place begins to look like every place, there's really no place anymore. So part of what I want to do as a woodworker is be able to recognize those little bits of culture and to be able to use the benefits of our modern world in a way that reinforces central places, specific localities and cultures, that we can take those same tools that is creating the sameness and instead being able to build up and reinforce distinct, unique places, something that makes our whole mosaic of a world go together. Places like Cody, Wyoming here. I don't remember who I was talking to last night, talked about it as being a place where you put the stake in the ground, that this is the home base for Western design. So in those things, I think that we share a lot of the same interests and ultimate desires. I think there's two risks in looking at our world that way. One is that we just blindly accept it. We go out and we look for the lowest price of whatever it is, and we buy that, and we don't even think about the implications of what that means. The other danger, I think, is that we want to jealously guard and keep out all external influences. And in trying to protect something, I think you end up suffocating it. So it's nice to see, in talking with a lot of the crafts folk here the last couple of days, is the different influences that they have, and how those things play together. So when I was talking to Carlene and Harris about today's presentation, they started talking at great length about a fella named Thomas Molesworth. Perhaps you've heard of him. And the story of Western design and its roots. Where did it come from? What defines it? What makes this place a unique place, something special that's worth hanging on to and investing in? So, a lot of the things we were talking about were people and events that got their start 80 years ago, sometimes even longer ago. And as I was hearing that, I was thinking a lot about the future, which may seem a little bit weird that, we're talking about something that happened a long time ago and what the future holds. But I want you to just kind of hang on here as I want to make some connections. I got to read Terry Winchell's book on Thomas Molesworth, and there was a lot of really cool historical background that came from that. So I want to talk a little bit about where I see Western design, my own history as a woodworker, and what I currently do, how those fit together, if you will. I started woodworking a long time ago with under my dad. He is still a printer. He's been working at it for 45 plus years, and on the side has always done a bunch of other things. He's been the plumber at home, and the carpenter, and the electrician, and the auto mechanic. And for fun, he did woodworking, and that that bug bit me as well, and that's where I got my start. And there's also been a connection from way back when, as I'll talk about as we go along, with Woodsmith Magazine. So when I was thinking about the future and how it relates to Western design and what we want to talk about, I was thinking that, encoded in the DNA of our country, of the United States, we have this innate genetic component of thinking about the future, of knowing of this grand and glorious future that we have. That's just part of who we are. I mean, it was in the founding of the nation, in our documents that we have, that sets out a vision of what a brand new country could look like. There's also been visions of the future that have included vast planned cities. I don't know if you've ever seen some of the architectural models for New York City or Chicago, or where they planned out these glorious cities of how people would live together. Even the utopian settlements had, we've had different groups that have come to this country for the specific reason of setting up something that's better. I mean, it even filters down into our popular culture, the Jetsons of what the future could actually look like. And I want to say that I feel like, those are really cool. They're easy to kind of wrap your head around. But as a woodworker, I feel like the visions of the future that are more significant, that actually have been more accomplished, are much smaller. They're much more personal and focused. And they deal with people's individual lives and the work that they do. And I think you'll be able to see how that connects to the work that's going on here. Because a lot of people, when they first came to this country, they realized that a future is something that's made. It's not a destination. It's not a destiny that is preordained or something that you're just going to naturally run into. Future is that something that you make with your own hands. A lot of people who came to this country, if they wanted a future, if they wanted to live to see another future, they had to make it. It was just mere survival. For other people who came, they saw our country and the opportunity to move here as a chance to redefine their future. They had to build something anew because they knew that they couldn't take what they were coming from, that there was a future that was staring them down in the face, and they didn't want that. And so they came to a place that offered them the chance to be able to reinvent themselves, to rebuild and offer something new for themselves and the people who come later. And that's another thing about the future that's kind of interesting when you think about making it, is that, we never really get there. It's like chasing the horizon. Every time you get where you think is the end, there's always something a little bit beyond. So the future that I see and that I would like to create is the one that I'm going to hand off to my children and the people that I'm involved with. And then they're going to have to chase and build their own future. So when we think about the future and how we want to create it, if you would accept my premise here that we can make it with our own hands, what I'm going to suggest is that there are three components of that future. And as a woodworker, just going to have to bear with me, I'm going to call them tools, because that just makes more sense to me. What I'm going to look at is history, craftsmanship, and then community. Now, what I mean by history and what I'm starting from is the fact that you really can't go anywhere unless you have a place where you are already. You can't get to somewhere unless you know where you are, and knowing where you are involves where you've been and where you've come from. Thomas Molesworth, when he came to Cody, Wyoming, he had a history of his previous life. He was also influenced by some of the craftsmen that were already in this area and began to work and created something that is the foundation of what the craftspeople that you see here this week are doing. So when you're aware of what your history is, it gives you an idea of what you want to go to. And in turn, in the same way, Thomas Molesworth influenced a number of people along the way. He gathered around him a number of craftspeople and encouraged them and developed them along the way. And in turn, they influenced another group of people. In my corner of the woodworking world, I've already shared that I started woodworking because of what my dad did. But Dad got his start in woodworking from a guy up the street, our neighbor. His name was Miles. He was an older gentleman, and when I was a kid, I got roped into a job of helping him do some stuff around the house. In the winter, I shoveled his driveway and sidewalks, which thankfully Dad really never told me was the fact that he lived on a corner, so that's like twice as many sidewalk as what I would really used to. During the summer, I mowed his lawn. One winter, for an odd job, I even scratched up the side of his '78 Ford with the snowblower, and just one of those things. Anyway, one day I was doing some work with him, doing some painting, and I had finished up, and then he brought me to his basement where his workshop was and was teaching me how to clean out the paintbrush. Now, this was in the days of oil-based paint, so he had the old, and there's probably a lot of you that are familiar with this, where he had a couple of jars. He had a clean jar of mineral spirits, kind of a junky jar of mineral spirits, and one that looked like sewage. And you just put the brush into the dirty one and swished it around for a little bit, and then let all the gunk settle out. Then you bring it to the next one and swish that around, and then by the time you got to the clean one, your brush was clean. You could dry it off, wrap it up, and it would be ready to use. And after a while, those, the junky one would get tossed out, and then the clean one would get a little cloudy, and then that would become the next one down the line, and then you'd make a new jar. So I was working on that, and Dad came over to see what we were doing and why it was that I was taking a long time. And Miles then started talking to Dad about something that he was building in his workshop. And Dad was really intrigued by it, and Miles said, well, it comes from this magazine called Woodsmith. So Dad borrowed a couple of issues of Woodsmith Magazine from him, and over the course of talking with Miles, learned about the magazine, and he's been a subscriber ever since. So indirectly, I trace my own woodworking to Woodsmith Magazine, where I work today. So it's kind of been a dream come true for myself, and frankly for my dad too. It's like heaven to him that he knows that I do that. So since then, my woodworking, I shared, even came before that. One of the first projects that I ever remember was the fact that Dad always let us mess around with the little scraps of wood that were left over in his workshop. So the first project that I remember building was a Green Bay Packer football helmet. So if you can think of what a 8-year-old would do with a handful of nails and some random scraps of board on what kind of a football helmet that would look like, that's exactly what it looked like. A little blocky, due to the size of the boards. There was really no way for that thing to fit over my head, and probably weighed 14 pounds that I would have kind of clunked over to the side. However, in my mind, it was perfect. It was flawless. The marker paint job that I did on it, pretty much ready for the NFL. So after that, I expanded into a couple of other projects, building a simple shelf, making a nail tote that used an old strap and was made from some ratty-looking 2x material that I think on its own weighed 28 pounds, and then once you filled it up with nails, was almost impossible to move, unless you had a forklift or something. Over time, though, Dad let me continue working on in the shop, and he would show me different things about what he was learning, and I was able to build some cabinets and boxes, and from there I got experienced the excitement of being able to build something for other people. couple of years in a row, I made some music boxes out of some walnut that you'd lift the lid on and it would start playing some music on it. Otherwise, it just had a really pretty look that it sat on the shelf. And made one for my mom and some other friends and family members. And that being able to make something for someone else and then seeing the delight in their eyes when they open it up and start using it is just something you just can't get over. So that progressed until to the point of when we were getting married that my wedding gift to my wife Jen was our dining room table. And it's a 6-foot-long harvest table style, and I had viewed it as something just as a symbol of my love to her, but also envisioned the fact that that table could be the center of our house, where it would be a place where we gathered friends and family for meals, a place where homework gets done and games are played and memories are shared. And right now that table, I'm going to tell you, doesn't look the same as when it was brand new. My son, when he was teething, decided that what would really help him feel better is if he started gnawing on the edge of it like a beaver. So there's a stretch of it about 18 inches long that has some chew marks in the finish on it. And there's marks in there when Sophie was learning how to write where, you write better if you press down harder with the pencil or the pen. So you can still see faint little lines in there. Things have been spilled on it or whatever. And I've realized that the table is not just a table anymore, it's become a vault of memories. And each one of those things, I could sand that all down, refinish the table, and make that thing pop, but you can't pay me enough money to do that. I'm not gonna erase those memories. So history affects us in very many ways. And one thing that we can think of history is, like I said before, as names and dates and something that kind of is static and in the past. But history, I think, is best when we turn it into something that I would call tradition. And tradition is a gift that comes to us from history. And tradition also becomes a little bit plastic and a little bit malleable because we take tradition, the things that we've learned from the people who have come before us, and we mold it and shape it. We figure out what are the things that we like about our history, the things that we want to change about our past in order to create the vision of the future that we have. So that when we take that tradition now and we move it on and we pass it off to the next generation or to people down the line who are interested in our own story or in our own craft, for me, woodworking, and for you, it might be something else, that's not going to be the same. It's changed. And you even see that today when you walk around the exhibit, that there are people, Western design clearly recognizes the value and the influence of Thomas Molesworth. And there are craftspeople who take that history and they love it. And now you can clearly see the DNA of Thomas Molesworth in their work. But there's other people who have considered the same history, value it just as much, hold on to that tradition, but in a totally new way. And they move on to stuff that Thomas Molesworth never would have recognized or that he's done. But yet even though there's a distinct change, it's still rooted very much in the connection to Western design as it's appeared in the past. And when we move on to the vision of the future, that it's going to be the same way as well. Gustav Mahler, the composer, had a quote that says that tradition isn't the worship of ashes, but it's the preservation of fire. And that's what I like to think of it as, is that we're not trying to freeze the past and define that Western design or any particular craft is locked into a certain look, but it takes that look, adds the influences of today, and is able to shape that and move it on towards the future. One of the ways that I do that in my own woodworking is I really like using old tools. I have a drill press from, I think, like the 1940s or 50s that I like using. It runs like a champ, but it just shows to me that that there were people that used that drill press to do a variety of things before I ever got it. Same thing with some of my old hand tools that I have, hand planes that are more than 100 years ago. I use them to make work that I feel like is contemporary and reflects the things that I want to do, but those tools have a past, and I think that there's a recognition that hopefully when I get to be older, that I will still have a use, that I have a value to people and to the world around me. So that's one of the ways that I do that. Now, if you're still following along with my premise that the future is something that we make with our hands, we have our first tool, history. Our second tool is craftsmanship, because we're talking about a future that's built, something that's created. In order to be able to create the thing that you want, you need to have some skill in being able to do that. So we have craftspeople who remember what the past is like. They're formed by and they're forming a tradition that'll be handed off to the future. And handing it off is part of their responsibility. You know, like I said, I learned woodworking, and even when I started at Woodsmith Magazine, it was because I was excited about woodworking, and I still am. It's a really fun craft. There's always something to learn. There are always new mistakes that I make that I have to figure out how to either cover up or never make again. But I've also realized that if I'm excited about this craft and I want to be able to see it continue on, I need to be able to move from mere enthusiasm to being able to teach that to other people. You know, I'll talk to people all the time. You know, we've had some friends of ours, 2 different families that we're friends with that have moved over the course of the year. And one of the fun things to me is that as they've moved into their new house, there's always a list of projects. And there's a feeling in our world that I think that, a lot of those things you can't do yourself. They're too complicated, they're too time consuming, you can't do it. But it's been a real joy for me to be able to show them how with just a few tools and a little bit of skill, you can be able to do some of these things on your own. And to me, that's exciting. And I think that's an important part of being a craftsperson, that not only have you mastered the skills of using the tools of your craft in such a way that they become second nature. You don't have to think about using them anymore. They are a part of you the same way that your hands are a part of you. But they've been able to marry that with the hard work and the dedication that it takes to be truly excellent in what they do. But I think that there's another component that's important in being a craftsperson, and that is being able to find somebody with even the barest inkling of interest and being able to transmit what you've learned and pass that on. There used to be a craft tradition that said that you shouldn't do that. These are the arts and mysteries of a craft, and they were locked up and kept secret unless somebody was ready to do it. But I think one of the things that I'd like to change about tradition is that I don't think that's the case anymore. I think if we want to be able to see things like that continue on, we need to invest in other people openly and freely as much as we can. When I started at Woodsmith Magazine, one of the people who did that was one of the shop craftsmen who build the projects that are in the magazine. His name's Steve Johnson, and he knew that I didn't know a ton about woodworking, but I had a high level of enthusiasm. So regularly during the week for the first year or so that I worked there, Steve would find me, or I would go down to the shop and find him, and he would teach me. We'd walk from tool to tool around the shop, and he'd show me how to set it up and how to use it and how to get the best results from it. And I know that my own interest and level in the craft has gone far above that, to the point now that my involvement in the TV show I like to think of as being a teaching component. And even the articles that I write in the magazine, it's not just one enthusiast writing to another, it's what can I communicate with enthusiasm to teach another woodworker what it takes to build a project, so that they can have those same kind of show and tell moments that I have with my wife, that they can come out of the shop, or on Christmas morning, they're opening up, friends and family are opening up the gift and they see something that they've made and be able to see that same delight. I'm sure all of you with kids know what it's like when you were a kid, what Christmas was like. You wanted to see the big pile of presents under the tree and be able to tear into them and hope that they weren't all underwear and t-shirts, but that they were actually the things and the toys that you wanted to play with. But as a parent, how much more you enjoy Christmas when you see the delight and experience Christmas through your children's eyes. For me, I know that there's been a lot of times at Christmas where I'm almost not as much interested in the gifts that I get as being able to see the joy on my kids' face when they open up their presents. and that same excitement. And I want to be able to do that with other woodworkers, to be able to pass along another skill so that they can do something and they'll be like, I can do that. I know what it's like. I'm able to do that. So that's what I do with teaching seminars and the work on the TV show. And I think that's an important part of being a craftsman, especially in these days when shop classes aren't being taught in schools. You know, there's just very few. They're being dropped for a variety of reasons. And as a result, I think we have a generation of kids that don't know that it's possible. You know, you can blame that all on a variety of things, you know, too much screen time and too much this or not enough that or whatever. But I have a feeling, I'm feeling a little bit more optimistic. You know, we have a lot of woodworkers. The average age of the woodworker that subscribes to our magazine is 65 years old. And in circulation terms, we talk about circulation attrition, that people will subscribe to the magazine for a number of years and then stop subscribing. But we know the reason why they're stopping subscribing, unfortunately. And what we'd like to do is be able to dial that back. And I feel like and a lot of the woodworkers who come through Des Moines for tours of our shop and offices, by the way, you're all invited. Come on down sometime if you're in the Des Moines area. I'll be happy to take you through. They always talk about, I just wish there were more young people that were interested. I wish there were more young people. But I feel like now there is a resurgent interest in making things. My own faith tradition says that our Creator gave us and instilled with us His image inside of us. So we have a God who created, and inside of us is that desire to create as well. And I think we're seeing more of that now. There's something called the maker movement, where people are combining building things with higher technology tools and combining materials in new ways. You see it in the craft beer scene in terms of people that realize that, you know, I don't have to go to the store and buy something. I can figure out how to make it on my own. So I think we have a new opportunity as craftspeople to be able to share with a new interest that's there. And when you can do that, you can compound those things, make them even more. All of that leads to my third tool, and that's community. And that a group of craftsmen form a community on their own, the smallest form of community that I want to talk about. And I've seen it here this weekend. How many of you guys all know each other? You know, and it was pointed out to me that in a way, you know, are you competing against each other? To a certain extent. You know, that's just a natural part of our world. That happened with Thomas Molesworth. You know, he had people from his own shop leave and start other companies. You know, and there's a natural wanting of guarding our own territory. But yet, even in Thomas Molesworth today, and especially when I've been talking with you guys these last couple of days, is seeing how acknowledging that you are sharing more about your lives and the way that you work, and being able to see different craftsmen contributing to projects of other people and together making something much bigger, something much better and more unique that truly defines of what it means to create the place that I talked about early on, about creating a place that's unique and distinct and is definitely not part of that sameness that I see throughout the rest of the world. Now, in order for a group of craftsmen to have a community, it needs a larger community around it. And that larger community needs to value craftsmanship and what it means to have someone who can dedicate their life in the pursuit of something, of a skill like that, and to do it at such a high level, because it takes time and dedication and resources. So one of the things that I think is important is being able to have a community that is familiar with making things on their own. You know, a lot of the craftsmen that Molesworth ended up using were people that had jobs already. They were working on ranches and farms and in towns doing other things, but on the side, they found making things that was important to them. And at some point, they were able to make the transition from hobbyist or part-time professional into the full-time dedication that they had, because they had a community around them that was able to do that. So I think it's important that we have that. I mentioned earlier, I feel like there's in the larger education field, there is an emphasis that if you want to pursue education, you have to do it in a white collar, in a cubicle, behind a computer screen sort of way, and that's a success. And that people who work with their hands, who are skilled, offers a less intellectual or a less valuable contribution to our society, and I think that's in many ways flipped. I think we need to create and cultivate a sense that the people who that I've met this week that have dedicated their lives are just as deep thinking and go through the amount of rigorous thought that is required in order to make beautiful projects, in order to be able to create them at such a high level that outstrips a lot of things that are done with high-level degrees. And I also said before about how contrasting to that, there's a lot of people who think that, in order to build furniture projects, for example, being a woodworker, that it's just too complicated. It's too complicated, it costs too much money, there's no way that I can possibly do it, and frankly, I can just go down to the store and buy it for $200. And instead, I want to be able to change that around and be able to value the fact that what you can buy at the store for $200 is in no way representative of what it takes to build something or to make something at a high level. And that requires a lot of support from the community around it. And it's something that I fight in the magazine, and when what we do with the TV show is that people will write in, why did you do this project of a bookcase? I can go buy a bookcase at Target, But what I want to do is be able to unlock what it takes to show that when we build a project, that you can break it down into smaller steps, so you get to this aha moment. Whether you ever build a project out of wood or not, and you watch our program, I want you to be able to say, oh, I get how that works. I know why that custom pieces of furniture require that kind of investment, both in time and money that it takes. So that familiarity, that community teaching, that knowledge creates, it also creates an audience that's ready to purchase those things and to support the craftsman. And I think that happens in a variety of ways. So when we think about these three tools that I've talked about, history, craftsmanship, community, that they all work together to be able to create a future that we want to bring, that we want to see happen. One final aspect, that we've already, if you think about it, we've already created and brought into being a vision of the future already, and that's our homes. Because the things that we have in our homes, the people, our family members, that we're teaching them about we're teaching our children to be a kind of person that we want the future to look like. The objects that we have in our home, those are things that we've bought and invested in such a way that these are the kinds of values that I want represented in the future. So let's look at our own homes as a small version of what we want our world to be in our future. Now, I'm not saying that every home across the entire world needs to have Western furniture or Western design influence in it. I'm sure a lot of the craftspeople would think that would be practically awesome, because that's a huge market now. But what I'm saying that represents is that when we buy something from the craftspeople today, is that it's an investment in knowing that when I have that in my house, it's a statement that says, I value, and what I want to see in the world around me is people that make things with their hands, that things that are made by hands are important. And so what I'm asking you today is to consider these tools that I've talked about, the history, the craftsmanship, and the community, and to find what your part in that is. And when we do that, you're fulfilling what these craftsmen represent, what Thomas Molesworth represented, is being able to shape a world that values things, that we move to and create that future that we want to be able to create it. And that's one of the reasons that I was really excited about coming here. And hopefully you'll be able to connect the dots here, in that What I think is important about creating a future by Western Hands thinks is important too, because we have that, they have in their new facility, which is super exciting, they have that element. They have the history in the museum part. They have the community in creating a gallery for craftsmen of today to be able to display their work, to interact with each other, and for the community to be able to support them and to be able to see and understand exactly what they're doing, why they're doing it, and support it in a unique way. And also with the community to be able to engage with our community and shape a world that values, understand, and engages in building things in the learning component. So as I wrap things up here, I just want to say, I just ask where you can fit in those things. Can you make something? Make something. Can you steer somebody into a class where they can understand what it takes to build something? As a craftsman, can you teach a class? Can you help connect the dots between our history, our community, and the craftsmanship to create a world that we want to live in? And I see that I'm running a little bit over time, and I appreciate your patience, and thank you all for coming today.
Thanks, Phil. That was really great. So in February, after we lured Denny Hammer out of retirement, we set our sights on another victim. And I'm pleased to announce that Wally Reber, who spent many decades as the assistant director of the Buffalo Bill Center of the West, has agreed to serve in a curatorial role with By Western Hands in the museum component. Wally spent many years during his time at the museum cultivating expertise in Molesworth furniture and Western design that sets him apart as an expert in that field. And I believe Wally would like to say a few words now. Right? Thanks, Wally. Yes.
I want to thank Yancy for that very kind introduction. And I'm never sure what Harris really wants me to say. Just say it slowly and articulately. We're going to do a museum as part of this By Western Hands. And for me, that's a very exciting prospect because it gives me, believe it or not, a second chance. In 1989, we did an exhibition here called The Craft and Style of Thomas Molesworth. This gives us an opportunity to look at that again, maybe through different eyes, maybe with different hands, but to tell the complete story of inspiration and history and perhaps even community. And I thank Harris and Yancy. I was going to say recruiting. Goading is probably a better word. But I really look forward to it. So the end of May and the start of June, there will be a new museum in town. And I think we should all look forward to its opening and to its message. So thank you very much, Yan.
And we'll wrap this up today with a few words from Harris Haston.
Wow, what a great crowd. I didn't turn around to look at all of the faces. Phil, Jennifer, thank you for coming. All of you who are here and part of this community need to know that Phil and Jennifer came with no gratuities. And we appreciate your taking your time and sending us this marvelous message that ties together all of the things we're trying to do to resurrect this whole process that we've been in for the last 30 or 35 years. I think we did have a really good idea of naming it the Lazarus Club. So I don't want to dwell on money, but we're going to have some more money to finish this building, the tenant finishes. We'll also need some capital for the basics of the heating and cooling and plumbing. I think we're pretty close to having those those dollars in hand, but one can never tell. And if we all stay on schedule, which we hope we will, then by next spring, by Western Hands will be occupying the old Gamble store. And I know that that many of the merchants downtown are looking forward to having some more energy and excitement brought to the retail scene downtown. If you have any questions for Phil Huber or for our board or for Carlene or me or any of our marvelous craftsmen who participated in the exhibit this year and over the last many years, please just go up to them. They've all got name tags on, and please engage with them. And we hope that you will tell your neighbors and your friends about what we're trying to accomplish with By Western Hands. Thank you so much for coming today.